When you really look at history, a strange pattern starts to emerge, one so consistent it's almost unsettling. Over the last 500 years, three global superpowers rose to heights no one thought possible, and then collapsed in ways no one believed could happen. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, different cultures, different centuries, different ideologies, but the same ending every time. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Right now, the United States is walking that same path, step by step, almost like it's following a script written long before America even existed. This isn't speculation. It's not a theory. It's a repeatable sequence. And as of today, the U.S. has already completed 5 of the 7 stages that historically lead to collapse. Not approaching them, not flirting with them, already past them. Which raises a question most people don't want to ask: what happens next? To understand where this goes, you first have to understand how empires actually die. Not the dramatic version with tanks rolling through capitals or flags being torn down. That almost never comes first. Real imperial collapse begins quietly, deep in the economic foundations. It starts when a nation stretches itself further than it can realistically sustain. Military bases scattered across the globe, endless foreign commitments, promises backed by debt instead of productivity. On the surface, everything still looks fine. The currency still works, the military still looks powerful, the government still speaks with confidence. But underneath, the system is cracking. At first, the damage is invisible. Resources are misused, innovation slows, productive industries shrink. Then momentum shifts. Allies begin hedging their bets. Rivals start testing limits. Trade partners quietly search for alternatives. The very advantages that once made the empire dominant, its currency, its military reach, its global influence, turn into liabilities. Money that once flowed inward rushes back home. Military commitments become impossible to maintain. And the promises that once carried weight suddenly sound hollow. This isn't new. It's exactly what happened to every empire that came before. Let's start where it all began, with Spain, the world's first true global superpower. In the 1500s, Spain was unimaginably wealthy. After Columbus opened the door to the Americas, Spain conquered vast empires and seized control of the richest gold and silver mines the world had ever seen. By the mid-1500s, ships loaded with silver crossed the Atlantic in staggering quantities, hundreds of tons every year. Spain didn't just participate in global trade, it controlled the global money supply. Spanish silver became the currency everyone trusted. If you controlled Spanish money, you controlled the world. And that's where the illusion began. Spain believed that controlling money meant permanent power. Under King Philip II, who ruled during the empire's peak, Spain launched into what would become the first stage of collapse, military overextension. Spanish forces fought wars across Europe, the Mediterranean, the Americas, and Asia, all at the same time. By the late 1500s, Spain had military commitments on 4 continents. The cost was astronomical. Half of the empire's revenue went straight into war, and even that wasn't enough. To cover the gap, Spain moved into stage 2, currency debasement. Instead of raising taxes or cutting spending, the crown quietly reduced the silver content in its coins, mixing in copper while pretending the value stayed the same. On paper, nothing changed. In reality, inflation exploded. Merchants lost trust. Prices soared. The money that once powered an empire began to rot from the inside. That led directly to stage 3. A debt spiral. Spain borrowed endlessly from foreign bankers to sustain its spending. Within just 2 decades, the empire declared bankruptcy, not once, but repeatedly. 4 times in 40 years. Each time, leaders promised reform. Each time, they returned to the same habits. Borrow, spend, repeat. But here's the part most people miss. Spain didn't collapse because it ran out of gold. It collapsed because the gold destroyed its productive economy. When money comes easily, production stops mattering. Why build when you can buy? Why innovate when you can import? Spanish society slowly abandoned work. Manufacturing declined, agriculture stagnated. The empire became dependent on foreign goods, while its silver flowed straight back out to pay for them. By the time the silver mines began producing less, Spain had nothing left underneath. That's stage 4, loss of productive capacity. And once that's gone, collapse becomes inevitable. Then came stage 5, social decay. Crime surged. Beggars filled the streets. The most capable citizens left for countries that were actually building something: France, England, the Netherlands. Spain was left with soldiers, bureaucrats, and institutions that consumed wealth but no longer created it. By the mid-1600s, territories were breaking away. By 1700, the empire still looked large on maps, but economically it was finished. Spain never recovered. Now fast forward 3 centuries to Britain, the empire where the sun never set. At its peak, Britain controlled a quarter of the planet. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. London was the financial center of the world. And just like Spain, Britain believed its dominance was permanent. It wasn't. By the early 1900s, Britain had military obligations across nearly every continent. Then came World War I. Britain chose to fight, and it won, but at an unbearable cost. The war drained its gold reserves and forced massive borrowing, primarily from the United States. For the first time, Britain wasn't the creditor, it was the debtor. Trying to maintain appearances, Britain attempted to prop up the pound at pre-war levels, even though the economic reality no longer supported it. The result was economic damage at home, falling exports, rising unemployment, and industrial decline. By 1931, Britain was forced to abandon the gold standard. The pound collapsed, and with it, Britain's claim to financial dominance. World War II finished the job. When the war ended, Britain had won, but it was broke. The empire unraveled almost immediately. India was gone by 1947. The rest followed. Within a generation, the largest empire in history had vanished, and the pound became just another regional currency. Then came the Soviet Union. After World War II, the USSR emerged as America's rival, armed with nuclear weapons and global influence. But beneath the surface, the economy was suffocating. The Soviet military consumed up to 20% of GDP. The state propped up allies across the world while its own industries stagnated. Innovation died. Agriculture failed. By the 1980s, the Soviet Union, rich in land and resources, couldn't even feed itself. The ruble wasn't trusted internationally or even domestically. Oil prices fell, gold reserves vanished, and once the money ran out, the empire collapsed almost overnight. From superpower to non-existence in just 900 days. 3 empires, same pattern, same ending. And now, America. So here we are, standing in the present, staring at a pattern that has already played out 3 times before. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union. Different flags, different languages, same trajectory. And now the United States has entered the most dangerous part of the sequence. Not the beginning, but the point where denial becomes fatal. Stage 1 for America was military overextension, and it's impossible to miss. The United States maintains hundreds of military bases across the globe, with troops operating in roughly 150 countries. We're committed to defending Europe through NATO, protecting Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines, countering China in the Pacific, Russia in Eastern Europe, and managing ongoing tensions across the Middle East. Our annual military budget is larger than the next several nations combined, and still, it's not enough. Equipment is aging, recruitment is falling. And the truth no one likes to say out loud is this. If multiple major conflicts erupted at once, the U.S. couldn't fully respond to all of them. That's the textbook definition of overextension. Spain reached it, Britain reached it, the Soviet Union reached it, and now, so have we. Stage 2 followed right on schedule, currency debasement. In 1971, the United States closed the gold window, ending the dollar's direct tie to gold and transforming it into a pure fiat currency. Since then, the dollar has steadily lost purchasing power. Since 2000, the money supply has exploded. Since 2020 alone, trillions of new dollars have been created. The method looks cleaner than mixing copper into silver coins, but the outcome is identical. More currency chasing the same amount of real goods means dilution. Inflation isn't an accident, it's the cost of debasement. Then came stage 3, the debt spiral. The United States now carries tens of trillions of dollars in debt, exceeding its annual economic output. Interest payments alone are approaching levels once reserved for defense spending. Even in times of economic growth, the government runs massive deficits, borrowing not to build, but simply to service previous borrowing. That's the same trap Spain fell into centuries ago, and Britain after 2 world wars. Debt stops being a tool and becomes a prison. Stage 4 is where the danger compounds, the loss of productive capacity. America still designs the world's products, finances them, and consumes them, but increasingly it doesn't make them. Manufacturing has been outsourced across the globe. Entire supply chains now exist beyond U.S. borders. Essential goods, from electronics to medicine to critical military components, depend on foreign production. The country imports vastly more than it exports, creating permanent trade imbalances. Just like Spain, wealth flows through the system but doesn't stay. And just like Spain, when the money flow slows, the vulnerability becomes obvious. That brings us to stage 5, the stage America is in right now, social decay. This is where collapse stops being abstract and starts becoming personal. Trust in institutions erodes. Political polarization hardens into paralysis. Crime rises, homelessness grows, Drug overdoses claim tens of thousands of lives every year. Fertility rates fall as people lose confidence in the future. The most capable and ambitious either leave, disengage, or retreat into private worlds. The social contract begins to unravel, not all at once, but piece by piece. Every empire that reached this stage believed it could stabilize itself. Every one of them was wrong. Spain thought its gold would save it. Britain believed its institutions would endure. The Soviet Union trusted its ideology. The United States tells itself it's different because of technology, innovation, or sheer historical momentum. But the pattern doesn't care about identity or optimism. It only responds to math. And once stages 1 through 5 are complete, history shows that the remaining stages don't take centuries. They arrive fast. Stage 6 is the loss of reserve currency status. This is the moment when the world quietly decides it no longer needs to hold your money. Trade begins shifting into alternative currencies. Central banks diversify into gold and commodities. Allies reduce exposure. Rivals actively work around the system. The currency that once flowed outward as global demand suddenly rushes back home, flooding domestic markets and igniting inflation at a scale few are prepared for. The early signs are already here. Countries are settling trade outside the dollar. Central banks are buying gold at record levels. Energy contracts that once required dollars are now negotiated in other currencies. None of this causes collapse on its own, but together, it signals a loss of confidence. And confidence is the real foundation of any reserve currency. Stage 7 is where everything snaps. Collapse doesn't arrive slowly. It doesn't politely warn you. It comes as a cascade. Currency crisis triggers a debt crisis, which ignites political crisis, which paralyzes institutions. The Soviet Union didn't fade away over generations. It vanished in less than 3 years. Britain lost an empire in a single generation. Spain held on longer, but the end result was the same: permanent loss of global power. When collapse hits, yesterday's assumptions die overnight. The superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency becomes regional. The empire becomes a memory. And this is the moment where people ask the hardest question of all. Is there a way out? Maybe. History doesn't forbid reform. It just shows how rare it is. Escaping the pattern would require acknowledging it, reversing it, and doing so quickly. It would mean reducing military commitments, restoring productive capacity, stabilizing currency, confronting debt honestly, and rebuilding social trust. No empire in history has managed all of that once Stage 5 was complete, not one. That doesn't mean collapse is guaranteed tomorrow. Timing is always uncertain. Spain took decades. Britain took a generation. The Soviet Union collapsed in a blink. What matters isn't the exact date. It's the direction. And right now, every measurable indicator points the same way. Since 2020, the pace has accelerated. More money creation, more debt, deeper division, greater dependency. What once moved slowly is now sprinting. The end isn't hidden anymore. It's visible, if you're willing to look. Maybe America will be the exception. Maybe it will do what no empire before it has done. Maybe it really is different this time. But history is not optimistic. Math is not sentimental. And patterns don't break just because we believe they should. If this made you see the world a little differently, stay curious. Because when Stage 6 turns into Stage 7, understanding what's happening and why won't just be interesting. It'll be essential. The answers aren't waiting in the future. They're buried in the past, written clearly for anyone willing to read them.